the 29th of July, and boom, bada boom, a perfect peak of the Crimean summer. A series of explosions in Crimea, the Moscow region, St. Petersburg and Kursk. The SBU has launched the second phase of the special operation Kerch Bridge and Russia's nuclear triad. Strikes on strategic airbases, the fleet and the bridge stunned the Kremlin.
There it goes again, look.
Not those bases.
Not those bases.
A large-scale evacuation has begun in Crimea. Stampede and panic.
Breaking news, friends. Emergency explosions in Crimea. Look, there's panic in Crimea. Evacuation has started. Russians are simply trying to flee the peninsula.
There's a traffic jam on the Crimean bridge starting from the Lukoil gas station.
This is the current situation in front of the Kerch Bridge. The Kremlin claims there is no panic.
As of today, there are no lines or, accordingly, any issues or problems related to traveling through the land corridor.
Kyiv's daring drone strike on Russia's nuclear bombers has sparked anger and concern in the Kremlin. Moreover, an exclusive, due to the SBU attacks on Russia's nuclear triad, the commander of the Russian Air Force has been killed. After the Ukrainian armed forces struck airfields in Moscow, Lieutenant General Sergey Kobylash, the commander of the Russian Air Force, accidentally fell out of a window. And he is only the first. The SBU is announcing new attacks on the Pacific Fleet, Russia's nuclear triad, bridges and strategic aviation. Something is burning.
The SBU has launched a new phase of the special operation called Nuclear Triad. We are attacking the Russian Navy, nuclear submarines, the Pacific Fleet, and the Kerch Bridge.
Russian propagandists and war correspondents in a panic.
Retribution, or more precisely, just punishment for those who orchestrate all this, is inevitable. And we, as civilized people, will negotiate with them about how they prefer to stand against the war.
When he's arrested, he won't be sent to a detention center where he can recover, read books, rest, eat well, and then return home with medals and decorations after the next prisoner exchange. He will be executed by firing squad, or better yet, hanged.
General Gulev decided to follow in Prigozhin's footsteps and blamed the Russian general staff for the loss of the nuclear triad's aircraft.
After all, strategic aviation is part of our nuclear triad. So they weren't just targeting any plane, they were specifically targeting an aircraft that carries special munitions, special warheads. Now, here's the question. Who is ultimately responsible for the nuclear triad? The general staff. You know, the scariest thing is, I really hope this doesn't just get swept under the rug, that someone is actually held accountable for this, not just some scapegoat like, say, the airbase commander who supposedly didn't guard the place well enough. This is actually a systemic problem.
Ukrainian special services are attacking military airfields, the Russian Navy, the Pacific Fleet is under attack, and even the Northern Fleet of Russia is being targeted. The general staff of that fleet is on fire. Friends, we will discuss the new phase of the SBU special operation, as well as the attacks on units, attacks on Russia's nuclear facilities, the attack on the Kerch Bridge, the evacuation in Crimea, the chaos, panic, and the sudden disappearance of Putin with the president of the Assembly of Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Kutayev, right now.
You see, the uniqueness of this entire operation lies in the fact that strategic aviation was destroyed. There was a strike on submarines, on the locations where Russia's nuclear submarine fleet is stationed. And it would seem, logically, one might think, Ukraine has had enough, it has completely exhausted all its resources. But that wasn't the case at all. The attack on the Kerch Bridge, one of the main, most powerful supports of the Crimean bridge, was completely destroyed. And now everyone is asking, what's next? What will be the next target? Because one after another, strategic aviation, the Navy now, the Kerch Bridge, and all of these are strategic sites, the most important ones for the Russian state. Ukraine has shown, first of all, that they are extremely vulnerable, that Ukraine can reach them. That's the first point. Second, that Ukraine will systematically destroy these targets, regardless of how well protected they are, and even if they are located several thousand kilometers deep inside Russian territory. And what does all this collectively indicate? It shows that Ukraine is strong, Ukraine has made progress, and Ukrainian special services are working in a multifaceted, multidimensional way. And now, even if you are some kind of super expert, it is simply impossible to predict what Ukraine will do next or which target they will strike. And of course, Russia doesn't know this either. And perhaps the last thing among this series of news, Ukraine has simply shown up the FSB. The Russian FSB, they were the ones who were supposed to control the movement of vehicles. They were supposed to keep the Ministry of Defense's security under control. But the FSB is responsible for oversight functions over political power, military capabilities, legal protection, facilities, people, and so on. With this, Ukraine has demonstrated first and foremost, I'm glad that Zelensky showed Trump who can win and who can strike a blow. Because after his significant conversation with President Putin, after talking extensively with Putin, Trump then told European leaders, I know that Russia will ultimately win. Now I have a question for Trump. Mr. Trump, who will win? Who will win this war? And this is so obvious to everyone, I hope to Trump as well. So moving forward, I think this is good news. They follow one after another. And most importantly, they are coming systematically, consistently, and these news stories reinforce each other, this very myth that Russia invented about its own greatness, about its power, has been completely destroyed. It's been shattered. And now Russia itself and Russians know that they are nothing even against Ukraine. What kind of talk can there be about NATO or America? So that's the news, Dasha. Good news.
Ruslan Hamdic, the SBU struck the Crimean Bridge a third time. Underwater supports of the pillars were severely damaged at the bottom. 1,100 kilograms of explosives in TNT equivalent contributed to this. The head of the SBU, Lieutenant General Vasil Maliuk, personally oversaw the operation and coordinated its planning. And according to the SBU, after the powerful explosion, the Crimean Bridge is now in an emergency condition. Right now, troops are constantly being used. Air defense is operating on the Kerch Bridge, and Russian special services are constantly closing it off. But first of all, I would like to discuss with you the evacuation from the Kerch Crimean Bridge, the evacuation from Crimea, because right now there are a huge number of Russians living in Crimea who are sobbing, crying, and want to evacuate. How do you assess these consequences?
They were expected many times. I, among others, have spoken with many people who, one way or another, ended up in Crimea, most likely ended up in Crimea. And so when these people called and we communicated somehow, I told them, leave there, run away. The day will come when you go to bed at night and you could travel across the Crimean Bridge, and then there will come a morning when you will no longer have that opportunity. Now they feel this acutely, they understand it. And now I am sure, I am simply convinced of this because I know the mood of some people, they are basically the same. They want to leave the Crimean Peninsula, an island. Soon it will be an island. And that's why I think there is an understanding among Crimeans as well that this so-called absolute security, all these various promises made to those who are in Crimea, to those who move to live in Crimea, are like morning fog, they dissipate, and people realize that there is no such thing as a free lunch, that even for this, they will definitely have to pay. And here, if you don't mind, I'd like to share a very interesting thought of mine. The SBU under Maliuk are now doing some truly extraordinary, very important, very large-scale things. But Ukraine also has the GUR, and there's Budanov. And these two intelligence agencies are competing with each other. So just imagine Dasha Budanov and his agency have to respond to the SBU to show that they're just as good and that they can do it too. And this understanding keeps me somewhat on alert, because soon we will witness the GUR carrying out operations on Russian territory that are no less significant. And these competitions between the Ukrainian intelligence agencies will drive the Russian Ministry of Defense and the Russian authorities to the brink. These are very interesting expectations. I think we will soon witness news from Ukraine's military intelligence.
It was the SBU that developed these special operations across the entire territory of Russia. As Russian war correspondents have said, the entire territory of Russia is covered. We are attacking everything precisely to create chaos in the Kremlin so that everyone starts putting pressure on Putin. And there might even be some kind of shift in power. Why did Putin run away? Where is he hiding? And in your opinion, can the Ukrainian special services, UR, SBU, and the armed forces of Ukraine create a situation in which Putin's summer offensive fails, he suffers defeat everywhere, and is forced to end the war?
For some reason, I am convinced that at least Russia will no longer be able to launch an offensive with that same sharpened force. Ukraine has already inflicted such moral damage on Russia that there is no longer that kind of focus, let's say, determination for an offensive. That's the first point. Second, we know Putin well. He is truly a cowardly person who is terribly afraid to make any decision. And in previous events in Russia, when something unimaginably difficult happened, and now something truly serious has happened in Russia, leader should have appeared at that very moment to make a statement, to say what he would do, how he would act. Putin does not, because of his cowardice. He hides. He doesn't know what to say right now. He's afraid that he might make a mistake. He's afraid that he might give the wrong assessment. And most importantly, right now, he will start putting people of lower rank, of course, in the spotlight, so that Russians themselves will remember them as the ones responsible for this entire failure of someone else. And that's why Putin is cowardly hiding somewhere. First, you and I talked about this, the Vice KOGPU, they said that with Kabaeva and their illegitimate children, they got on a plane with Putin and headed somewhere toward the Far East, maybe Bashkiria or Altai, somewhere in that direction. But most likely, he's not in Moscow. Most likely, you see, unlike many others, Putin understands that Ukrainian intelligence services could get to him as well. And that's why, without a doubt, he's hiding. He's afraid of his own inner circle. We've talked about this a lot as well. He's afraid of the FSB. He's afraid that he could be physically eliminated. And that's why Putin is hiding. And right now, Putin has gone silent and isn't making any statements because he has nothing to say. He has to say something, after which some actions, some steps should follow. You've probably seen, well, I don't know if they're fakes or not. The streets and squares of Moscow are packed. These Muscovites, Russians, are demanding that Russia immediately strike Kyiv to deliver heavy blows there. I assure you, Muscovites didn't need to ask for that. If they had anything they could do, they would have done it. There was no need to ask. Well, they simply have nothing. All they had was this little hazel stick, that's it. And even that is a sham. It's a sham. As many people, including those in Moscow, told me they took an old Soviet missile, cut it up, cobbled something together, and that missile did absolutely nothing. That's why I think, first of all, Putin is hiding. Secondly, he has nothing to say for now. And thirdly, any statement he makes should be followed by some kind of action. For now, I think they still haven't managed to mobilize and are not ready to respond yet. What are they preparing? They'll do something. We know what they're going to do. They will strike at the most vulnerable, the most unprotected places, at civilian targets, at peaceful people. This is exactly the style and method of behavior of Putin, his regime, his inner circle, and the people of the Russian world and Russian ideology.
Friends, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dasha Seva. We're almost at 700,000. Thank you so much. In the comments, let me know what you think about the second phase of the SBU special operation, the attack on the Kerch Bridge, and the fact that Ukrainian intelligence agencies are preparing to attack the Navy, strategic aviation and nuclear submarines. We'll talk about this in more detail in the second part with Ruslan Kamdyevich. And also, most likely a decision will be made for the Senate to vote on hellish sanctions against Russia. Share all your thoughts about this in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. From the bottom of my heart, I am truly grateful for every comment, every subscription, and every like. Ruslan Kamdyevich, I would like us to discuss the attack on the Northern Fleet. This is a very significant event. When strategic bombers were attacked, Ukraine carried out a strike on the naval headquarters of the Northern Fleet. And when I spoke with the military today, they said that in principle, the nuclear triad, I understand this to mean the Yars, Topol, and nuclear submarine should be targeted, and that would have a much stronger and more significant impact on Putin. And the fact that we struck the Northern Fleet is also significant. Russia has a huge number of nuclear submarines and submarines in general. How do you assess these prospects and this direction for our armed forces and special services?
Indeed, the very fact that Ukraine was able to pinpoint the location, let's say the port where nuclear submarines are based on board, of which this, let's say, this weapon is stored, this the most terrifying weapon of our time is remarkable. And when Ukraine reaches this location, they strike. After all, they could have hit that nuclear submarine there and could have damaged it. And in fact, that weapon could have detonated. I don't know the details. I'm not a military person. But in any case, this is so deeply thought out. Just think about the vastness, the sheer expanse of territory involved. Strategic aviation, which carries nuclear warheads, submarines, this is sea, this is air, this is land. And Ukraine has identified all of this and sent a message to Putin. We know where you store your weapons. We know what you use to transport and move them and how you plan to use them. And we have found ways and methods to influence and destroy all your, let's say, trump cards, to use Trump's language. And these cards, they really have been beaten. And now I just can't imagine what Russia would have to do to compensate for this damage that has been inflicted. You probably watched the negotiations on June 2nd in Istanbul. Did you see that Russian delegation as if they were attending Putin's funeral? There they are, sitting all of them literally because they have to bear this shame. And there they are in front of all those cameras, and everyone knows about Ukraine's offensive. Everyone knows that Ukraine is on top. They actually wanted to come, by the way, in his short interview, Medinsky made a very interesting remark. He said that since Russia is advancing, and on this territory that we've taken, there are bodies of Ukrainian soldiers. He really emphasized that point. Now, imagine if there hadn't been this attack, how would they have spun that narrative? How would they have presented it to America, to Trump, saying, we could practically take Kyiv tomorrow? A very successful operation, an outstanding job. In fact, in the future, this will be studied in military academies and schools all over the world, Ukraine's conduct. It's just like yesterday when we met with some very sophisticated people in Europe, we talked about this. I said, it's if we agreed that 10 years ago, you could only see this in science fiction movies, drones flying out of some assembly line, out of some machine, like bees, and attacking as if it were a sci-fi film. And it's not America or Europe pretending to do this, it's Ukraine that's actually doing it. This shows just how advanced their thinking is, how advanced human thought and their intellect are, how globally they think, and how unconventional they're thinking. And this is also where you see it's such profound advancements in science and technology are being achieved through the unconventional nature of their thinking. Amazing, incredible. I think we'll be under this impression for a long time, and following your logic step by step. You mentioned the first stage, the second stage, so that means there's a third stage and even a fourth stage. We definitely need to wait and see what Budanov will say, and he has to say something. This guy, I know him, he's a very serious guy. I'm convinced that he will definitely speak in his own language, in Budanov's language.
Ruslan Kamdyevich, it's Crazy America will be a topic too. We'll talk about that in a moment, but I can't help but ask you about the information reported by the Chekau GPU as well, that supposedly Putin's closest associates, realizing where things are heading, understanding that there could be an attack and how Russia could be destroyed, is suggesting to Putin that he step down from power in 2026 and choose a successor. Yekaterina Tikhonova, his daughter, who could run in the elections, win those elections, of course, in quotation marks, and become the president of Russia. Even in the context of what, how August is always a dangerous month for Russia, it's that kind of month. Well, you remember. So perhaps in August, these events of ours, our intelligence agencies' actions, could lead to a certain zone of turbulence in Russia. What do you think?
I've even heard this from people in St. Petersburg. I'm not saying it's some kind of secret or exclusive information from them, that it's specifically the Kovalchuks who are proposing Tikhonova, that she needs to be replaced. Right now, for Putin, everything must be absolutely flawless, can't afford to look back. He needs to be certain about his own security, the security of Kabayeva and the children she supposedly had with him, and maybe that's the only thing that matters here. And most likely, this sounds very close to the truth. All the more so, brother, we've talked about this too. Putin's daughters are quite actively involved. We know on the one hand there's Belousov, the Minister of Defense, and also Kirill Dmitriev. These people are already assets of Putin's daughters. And right now they're on the front lines making decisions. They're, for example, involved in negotiations with America. So everything is heading toward the fact that specifically this Tikhonova, at least one of his daughters will, or both daughters, could equally lay claim to this. Because from the perspective of the scientific community, as we know, one is involved in genetics, while the other is advancing a different field of science. And so these daughters could become precisely that, personnel replacement for Putin, who would provide him with guarantees of his safety. And this significant reshuffling could indeed happen. And it is truly a profound reshuffling, because if power is inherited directly from father to children, well, these are precisely the established methods of long-standing dynasties, let's say, of various historical regimes. Well, this is something Putin might do, and I am inclined to trust this information. At the very least, I readily believe that this is not the first day or the first month that they have been talking about and discussing this. And for Putin, this is the most acceptable option.
As for the month of August, again, without a doubt, this is conspiracy theory. But Vladimir Osechkin claims that a coup is possible. Everyone is talking about what you mentioned, that Putin has disappeared. We discussed this today as well with Alexander Demchenko. He also believes that August could be a critical month for Putin. I know that that you always take a very firm stance, approach questions very rationally, and are always cautious about conspiracy theories. That's why your opinion is very important after all. In your opinion, could the work of Ukrainian intelligence services lead to a dangerous August for Putin and for Russia as a whole?
Without a doubt, but I don't believe in a coup. You're absolutely right here. I've studied Russian power, the court of Russian military, far too well. Well, there hasn't been an equivalent in previous history. But as for August and Russia's behavior, I primarily see this on the front lines. Something like that could happen here. I always say this whenever I'm in Ukraine, when I meet with the military, including my fellow countrymen, and not just them, but also those involved in reconnaissance and sabotage activities, I always say that some kind of breakthrough, a serious breakthrough that would inflict both damage and, very importantly, have a moral impact, showing that Russia cannot defend itself, could contribute to a retreat. We need to understand the Russian army, at least on one sector of the front, on a major sector, must suffer some kind of crushing defeat, a breakthrough by the Ukrainian army, and they must begin to retreat. Then everything will start to retreat. And this wave of people retreating, that's chaos. It's chaos. And that's exactly what the FSB is preparing for. And not just the FSB. Many are preparing for this. I'll be honest, I'm preparing for this. My friends and I, we're also getting ready for this in Moscow. We have no intention of giving up Moscow's squares and streets to either the FSB or the Russian liberals, those so-called good Russians and so on. We will fight for these streets and these squares. So you are asking the right question, Dasha. That's all. This danger is already upon us. And the most interesting and perhaps the most remarkable thing about all this is that the Ukrainian special services are capable of doing it. There is parity on the front lines. On the front lines, even though Russia vastly outnumbers the Ukrainian army, both in manpower and equipment. But the Ukrainians have still managed to maintain parity, to hold the front. And it is precisely the actions and work of the Ukrainian special services that can create this very, let's say, critical moment when they will flinch and finally begin. And I believe this is the narrowest point on the front lines. And it won't be Gerasimov, nor the generals close to him, nor any general who studied at the Russian General Staff Academy who will lead this. No, it will be the corners, those who are in the mud, in that drunken haze, where they ran dens and sold drugs. Someone from that filth will have to crawl out. And among them, with all that camaraderie and those gangster-like understandings, they are the ones who can do it. And right now, we are very close to this happening.
Samuel Mamdic analyzing the visit of Yermak and the Ukrainian delegation to the USA. In your opinion, will the Senate strengthen sanctions in the near future? Will they vote for secondary sanctions against the Russian Federation?
They are ready. They are ready. Two congressmen, two senators from the Democratic and Republican parties came, and they demonstrated this. The situation is ripening. Now, Yermak and the Ukrainian delegation, they will be meeting. They can go there confidently now. Now, excuse me, maybe not exactly on white horses, but they definitely rode in on gray horses. I'm speaking figuratively, that these, they have something up their sleeve to bring and show. Everything depends on the situation inside America itself, on what state Trump himself will be in. Trump's dynamics are negative. And so when the time comes, I hope the Ukrainians went there specifically to show these Americans that we will not lose. That is, that the Ukrainians will not lose. And this position needs to be strengthened. And when the Senate feels this, the Senate is ready. I can say this confidently. I can't speak for Congress, but the United States Senate is ready to adopt these sanctions. Even Trump won't be able to block them because they can bypass him with 81, 82 people are qualified majority. Well, whether Congress supports it or not is another matter. There needs to be some movement here, and this movement will definitely give it energy. I think the kinetic energy of this movement will be present in America. We'll wait and see. I don't think we can expect these tough sanctions today or tomorrow. But these sanctions are not far off either. Let me put it this way, and I'll say it very cautiously. By autumn, Russia will face these sanctions. Why by autumn? Because by that time, Ukraine's positions will have strengthened even more. And then it will be absolutely clear that Russia is being stubborn. Look, for example, there are some very important humanitarian issues, prisoner exchanges, those under 25, the exchange of bodies of the dead, things like that. But the point is, Dasha, and I want to remind our viewers, it was Trump who initiated the idea of holding negotiations. And he proposed a 30-day suspension of the war. Right now, people are discussing absolutely everything except the actual question that Trump proposed. In other words, the Russians are maneuvering. They say, let's pause for half an hour on this front, and on another front, let's do something else. Believe me, from my experience in the previous two Chechen wars, they only stop where they need to regroup. They'll suggest freezing the situation for a few hours or half a day so they can either bring in weapons or do something else. They couldn't care less about the wounded. Those wounded that Ukraine is about to hand over to Russia, they won't let them go. Believe me, these people will be sent straight to the front lines very quickly. They'll even be punished and thrown into meat-grinder assaults. So, Dasha, I think right now we're in a positive, hopeful state, expecting that Ukraine will strengthen its positions. America will eventually realize this and finally impose those hellish sanctions of theirs. And in the end, the Taurus missiles will start working too. And it's about time, finally, that we start receiving more serious weapons that can reach both Moscow and St. Petersburg, so we can win at least by autumn.
Friends, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Leave a few kind words in the comments to support Ukraine. I'm grateful for every like, every comment, and every subscription from you. We work for an audience all over the world so that they know the truth. Today we discuss the new stage of the SBU special operation. President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Uslan Kutayev, Ruslan Mamdocic, thank you very much.
All the best. Take care. Let's support Dasha. Let's subscribe. We need 1 million dear viewers. Let's make Dasha happy with 1 million subscribers.